I'm going to ask you to tell a story because when I was a medical student years ago, you did this great, great study that I loved with ceftriaxone dosing, 2 grams to 1 gram. Do you mind
Sure.
telling that story?
No, it was a very ironic thing. When we turned order entry on, we set the default dosing frequency for ceftriaxone at BID or twice daily.
Yeah.
And the main advantage of the drug is it can be given once daily.
Yeah.
We didn't even know exactly why we did that. It just somehow happened.
Yeah.
And what happened as a result was overnight, 90% of the time after we put in place order entry, the doctors were giving it twice a day. That was wasting a lot of money.
Yeah.
We just took the position of the cursor and moved it from BID to QD, or once daily.
Yeah.
That single change saved the hospital $300,000 in the first year.
Wow. And basically the physicians just switched their prescribing overnight.
They switched just overnight. We went from 90% one way to 80% the other, and we didn't have to go out and beat anybody up. It was really remarkable.
And what that tells me, and tell me if you interpret it the same way, is that physicians are assuming that the person who has set the default has thought about it, and that's probably the right way to do it. Is that how you interpret that?
That's exactly right. And the corollary of that is that it's really, really important to get those things right, because if you don't, people will reliably make mistakes.
Got it. So you can actually, just as you had this amazing ability to fix something overnight, you can actually create problems overnight if you get the default dosing wrong.
Absolutely.
How much of that ordering stuff can we eliminate, reduce by this set of activities?
Well, so even a very simple ordering system reduced the serious error rate by 55%.
That's a big effect, just even the simple system.
Exactly.
What about this stuff?
So,
how do we begin to deal with those?
So there are a couple of strategies.
Yep.
One, and the one that's been the most powerful, is barcoding.
Okay.
So if you take medications
Yep.
and you barcode them in the pharmacy, first of all, you can check to make sure that you're dispensing what you thought you were.
Yeah.
And we've showed that when we did that in the pharmacy, the error rate went down really substantially by roughly 30%.
So you can reduce these guys.
Yeah, it didn't go down. They didn't go away completely, because for some things it's hard to dispense using a barcode.
Yep.
And then we also showed that when drugs are administered at the point of care, that also decreases the error rate by around half. Now, some drugs are not given in pill form, right? They're given by vein.
Yep.
And there, the key technology is smart pumps, which are pumps that can be told what medication is being administered. You can have a library of drugs that's specific to the given location, so it's different for a cancer ward than for another unit.
Yep.
And that pump checks to make sure that the patient is getting the right thing, and if the nurse tries to administer too high a dose, they get a warning.
This set of technologies, I brought out BCMA, barcoded medication administration. Sounds like it can make a pretty substantial dent in the medication errors.
Absolutely.
Okay. Imagine you're running a public hospital in India, and you may not be able to make big investments in electronic systems. What are kinds of things you can do to begin to chip away at this relatively big problem of medication errors and adverse drug events?
Yeah, so there are a number of things that any organization can do. One is just to make referential materials available via the web. That's possible in almost any setting.
Yep.
It turns out that there are certain medications which are quite concentrated. If you take those out of the clinical setting, that can be helpful.
Okay.
I think before too long, though, even in places like India, we'll be seeing relatively low-cost computer order entry applications being used for lots of ordering of medications.
Great. So 3 things that I heard, and let me just go through them a little bit. One is a lot of times just having access to reference materials about doses and interactions, especially for the common stuff. It's often not available. If you can make that available on a web page for your hospital website, that can be helpful.
Second thing was concentrated drugs.
Right, concentrated drugs, the stories I've heard about this, especially around things like potassium, certain drugs that when they're available, people by mistake administer them.
Exactly.
And can cause fatal problems,
right,
especially with potassium. And then the third thing, thinking about electronic systems, I can envision, okay, so maybe sort of computerized provide order entry where you're sitting in a kind of a computer box, maybe expensive, but you can imagine mobile technologies where doctors can still get a lot of the benefits. And mobile technology is obviously widely available throughout the world.
Exactly.
Okay. So you think that that is already starting to come, and we're only going to see a lot more of that?
I do.
Okay. And if you're running a public hospital in India and your budget is tight, would you say that's an area that you would focus on if your goal is to improve safety?
I think the first things I would focus on would be, for example, having a really good hand washing program. Doing some things like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I would do some sort of evaluation to try and sort out where my big issues were.
Yeah.
Before figuring out which place to put my chips on.
And let's say you find that medication errors and medication-related issues are a major problem. Sounds like electronic prescribing, even relatively inexpensive forms of that, can begin to make that.
Can have a big impact. Absolutely.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much.
No, you're welcome.